In the early 1900s, Boston was a city alive with industry and ambition. The North End, a vibrant neighborhood teeming with factories, warehouses, and the homes of immigrant workers, stood as a testament to this era. The streets echoed with the clanging of machinery, mingled with the voices of vendors and the laughter of children playing. It was a place where dreams of a better life took root, particularly for the Italian immigrants who had made it their home. Among these bustling streets and towering buildings, molasses became a vital part of the industrial landscape. Imported from the Caribbean, this sticky substance was stored in large tanks before being processed into industrial alcohol, essential for making explosives and other products. The demand for molasses soared during World War I, and the Purity Distilling Company, a subsidiary of United States Industrial Alcohol, USIA, saw an opportunity to capitalize on this need. Dr. John Miller, an economic historian, reflected on this period. The North End was a microcosm of Boston's industrial might. Factories and businesses lined the streets, and the neighborhood was a melting pot of cultures, primarily Italian immigrants seeking a better life in America. These immigrants brought with them their traditions, food, and a strong sense of community, which became the backbone of the neighborhood. Yet, in the midst of this vibrant community, a ticking time bomb was about to be set in motion. The Purity Distilling Company decided to construct a massive molasses tank in the North End, a project driven by the wartime demand for industrial alcohol. The tank, completed in 1915, stood 50 feet tall and 90 feet in diameter, with a capacity of 2.3 million gallons. However, the construction was rushed, and many safety protocols were ignored. The tank was built with thin steel plates and poor quality rivets, which were not adequate for containing such a large volume of liquid. Dr. Robert Thompson, an engineer, later commented, "The tank was hastily built to meet the rising demand for industrial alcohol during World War I. It stood 50 feet tall, 90 feet in diameter, and had a capacity of 2.3 million gallons of molasses." However, the construction was rushed, and many safety protocols were ignored. The tank was built with thin steel plates and poor quality rivets, which were not adequate for containing such a large volume of liquid. From the beginning, the tank's design flaws were apparent. It leaked constantly, and residents grew accustomed to the sight of molasses trickling from its seams. The sweet smell of molasses was a constant in the air, and children would often collect the leaking syrup in jars. Maria Rossi, a local historian, recalled, "My grandmother used to tell stories about how the children would collect molasses in jars from the leaking tank. It was a part of daily life in the North End, and no one could have imagined the danger it posed." Despite numerous complaints and reports of leaks, the Purity Distilling Company took minimal action. Instead of addressing the structural issues, they simply painted the tank brown to hide the leaks, a superficial fix that did nothing to address the underlying problems. As the winter of 1918-1919 progressed, Boston experienced fluctuating temperatures. The city saw unseasonably warm days followed by freezing cold nights. On January 15, 1919, an unusually warm day began with temperatures reaching around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a significant temperature swing. This rapid change, combined with the fermentation of the molasses inside the tank, created a buildup of gas and pressure. Dr. Jane Smith, a historian, explained, "The fermentation process likely produced carbon dioxide, increasing the internal pressure within the tank. Coupled with the structural weaknesses, this was a recipe for disaster." The tank was essentially a ticking time bomb, and the warm weather was the final trigger. At approximately 12:30 p.m., the pressure became too much for the tank to bear. Without warning, it burst open, unleashing a catastrophic flood of molasses. A wave of molasses, estimated to be 25 feet high and moving at 35 miles per hour, surged through the streets of the North End. The sheer force and speed of the wave were devastating, sweeping away everything in its path. Antonio D'Estasio, a resident who was just a boy at the time, vividly remembered the chaos. "I was just a boy playing in the street with my friends. Suddenly we heard a loud bang, and the ground shook. We turned and saw this massive dark wave coming towards us. We ran as fast as we could, but the molasses caught up with us. It was like being swallowed by a monster. Buildings were torn from their foundations, freight cars were hurled from their tracks, and people and animals were caught in the sticky, suffocating wave. The molasses poured into homes, businesses, and basements, trapping residents inside. The force of the flood was so great that it destroyed several city blocks, leaving a path of destruction in its wake. Rescue efforts were immediate, but extremely challenging. The viscosity of the molasses made it difficult for rescuers to move, and the cold weather soon turned the sticky syrup into a thick, hardening mess. Firefighters, police, and volunteers worked tirelessly to save those trapped, but the conditions were harrowing. The molasses had hardened like concrete, making it nearly impossible to free those who were buried. The disaster claimed 21 lives and injured 150 others. Many of the victims were crushed by debris or drowned in the molasses. The dead included children, workers, and residents of the North End. The impact on the community was profound, as families mourned the loss of loved ones and struggled to cope with the devastation. Among the dead were 10-year-old Pasquale Iantosca, firefighter James H. Keneally, and blacksmith Cesare Nicolo. Their stories, and those of the other victims, are a somber reminder of the human cost of this industrial disaster. Each victim had their own story, their own dreams, and their loss was deeply felt by the community. Josephine Cabral, a survivor, recalled, "I remember the sound, the feeling of being lifted off my feet, and the darkness that followed. It felt like the end of the world. The molasses was so thick that it was hard to breathe, and I thought I was going to die." The injured were taken to nearby hospitals, where doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to treat the wounds caused by the molasses and debris. The community rallied together, offering aid and support to those affected. Churches and community centers opened their doors to provide shelter and comfort to the displaced. In the days following the disaster, the city of Boston came together in a remarkable show of solidarity. Volunteers from all over the city, and even from neighboring towns, arrived to help with the rescue and cleanup efforts. This collective response highlighted the resilience and strength of the community in the face of tragedy. In the wake of the disaster, public outrage grew. The survivors and families of the victims demanded answers and justice. An extensive investigation was launched to determine the cause of the tank's failure. The City of Boston, state authorities, and federal investigators all took part in examining the circumstances leading up to the catastrophe. Dr. Robert Thompson, an engineer, stated, "The investigation revealed that the molasses tank had several design flaws. It was constructed using thin steel plates that were unable to withstand the pressure of 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Additionally, the tank was not adequately tested before it was filled to capacity. Furthermore, the rivets used in the construction were of poor quality, leading to leaks. The investigation also revealed that the tank's design was never properly reviewed by an experienced engineer. The rapid temperature change on the day of the disaster may have caused the molasses to ferment and produce gas, increasing the internal pressure. The company initially tried to blame anarchists, suggesting that the tank had been sabotaged. However, the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to negligence on the part of the company. The investigation revealed a lack of proper oversight and maintenance, and that the company's efforts to hide the tank's flaws were motivated by the rush to meet wartime demands. Emily Peters, a legal historian, explained, "This case was significant because it set a precedent for corporate responsibility and liability. The ruling emphasized the importance of proper safety standards and inspections for industrial facilities." After years of litigation, in 1925, a judge ruled that USIA was responsible for the disaster due to the tank's faulty construction and inadequate maintenance. The court's decision was a landmark moment in corporate accountability, highlighting the need for stringent safety regulations and thorough inspections. The aftermath of the Molasses Flood led to one of the first class action lawsuits in Massachusetts. More than 100 lawsuits were filed against the United States Industrial Alcohol Company. The legal battle was long and complex, involving numerous testimonies and expert analyses. In an effort to deflect blame, the company suggested that anarchists had sabotaged the tank. This claim was quickly dismissed as the investigation uncovered extensive evidence of corporate negligence. Documents revealed that safety concerns had been repeatedly ignored, and cost-cutting measures had compromised the tank's structural integrity. Emily Peters, a legal historian, noted, "The legal proceedings following the disaster were groundbreaking. The court's decision underscored the critical importance of corporate accountability and set new standards for industrial safety. This case marked a pivotal moment in regulatory reform, emphasizing that prioritizing profit over safety could lead to devastating consequences." The court awarded the victims and their families a total of $628,000 in damages, equivalent to about $9.7 million today. This compensation helped some families rebuild their lives, but the trauma and loss endured by the community were immeasurable. The settlement also sent a strong message to corporations about the importance of adhering to safety standards. The cleanup of the North End was a monumental task. Crews worked for weeks to remove the hardened molasses from the streets, buildings, and infrastructure. The molasses had seeped into the ground, and the smell lingered for decades. The cleanup process was labor-intensive, requiring the use of saltwater, sand, and a significant amount of manpower. Despite the devastation, the community showed incredible resilience. the North End rebuilt, and life slowly returned to normal. However, the memory of the disaster remained a poignant part of the neighborhood's history. Frank DeLuca, a resident, recalled, "My grandparents used to tell me stories about the flood. They said you could still smell molasses on hot summer days, even years after the disaster." The cleanup efforts were supported by the city of Boston, local businesses, and volunteers from all over the region. This collective effort showcased the community's ability to come together in times of crisis, highlighting the strength and solidarity of the North End residents. The disaster also led to significant changes in industrial practices. The lessons learned from the molasses flood influenced safety regulations and building codes, aiming to prevent such a tragedy from occurring again. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 left an indelible mark on Boston and serves as a stark reminder of the potential consequences of industrial negligence. The disaster's impact extended beyond the immediate loss of life and property, prompting lasting changes in industrial safety standards. Today, the site of the disaster is marked by a plaque that honors the memory of those who perished. The flood is remembered not only for its bizarre and tragic nature, but also for the legal and regulatory changes it spurred, leading to improved safety standards in industrial practices. Dr. Susan Parker, a sociologist, reflected, "The Great Molasses Flood is a significant event in American history, not just because of its oddity, but because it highlighted the need for rigorous safety standards in industrial operations. The disaster brought about changes that helped prevent similar incidents in the future." The impact of the Great Molasses Flood went beyond the immediate devastation. The personal stories of those who experienced it and their descendants provide a deeper understanding of the disaster's lasting legacy. These narratives offer a human perspective on the tragedy, highlighting the resilience and strength of the North End community. Luca Ricci, a descendant of victims, shared, "My great-grandfather was one of the many who helped with the rescue efforts. He often spoke about the horrors he saw that day, but he also talked about the community coming together to support each other. His stories were passed down through our family, and they remind us of the importance of looking out for one another." Many families who lived through the flood passed down their stories through generations. These narratives are filled with both sorrow and resilience, reflecting the community's strength in the face of tragedy. The disaster became a part of the collective memory, shaping the identity of the North End. Maria Lombardi, a historian, observed, "The North End is a tight-knit community. The flood brought people even closer, as they worked together to rebuild and remember those who were lost. The stories of survival and heroism became an integral part of our local history, passed down from one generation to the next." Personal reflections on the disaster reveal the deep emotional impact it had on the survivors and their families. These stories provide a poignant reminder of the human cost of industrial negligence and the importance of community solidarity in the face of adversity. The Great Molasses Flood also served as a crucial learning point for engineers and scientists, prompting advancements in safety standards and industrial practices. The disaster highlighted the need for rigorous testing and proper construction techniques in large-scale industrial projects. Dr. John Harris, a structural engineer, stated, "The disaster highlighted the need for better materials and more rigorous testing in industrial construction. It changed how we approach the design and maintenance of large storage tanks and similar structures." The lessons learned from the molasses flood are still relevant today, as they underscore the importance of safety and engineering integrity. One of the major changes was the introduction of stricter building codes and more thorough inspection protocols. These measures were designed to ensure that no such disaster could occur again. Engineers and architects began to place a greater emphasis on safety, conducting detailed analyses and stress tests to prevent structural failures. Dr. Emily Williams, an industrial safety expert, noted, "Today, the lessons from the Great Molasses Flood are taught in engineering and safety courses around the world. It's a stark reminder of the importance of diligence and accountability in industrial operations." The disaster underscored the critical need for comprehensive safety regulations and effective oversight. The scientific and engineering lessons learned from the molasses flood had far-reaching implications, influencing the development of modern safety standards. These changes helped pave the way for safer industrial practices and reduce the risk of similar catastrophes in the future. The Great Molasses Flood left a unique cultural imprint on Boston and beyond. The bizarre nature of the disaster has made it a subject of fascination and a part of local folklore. Over the years, the story of the flood has been passed down through generations, evolving into a cultural touchstone for the city of Boston. Dr. Ann Johnson, a cultural historian, commented, "The flood has been referenced in books, songs, and even plays. It's a part of Boston's identity, a strange yet significant event that continues to capture the public's imagination. The unique nature of the disaster, with a wave of molasses sweeping through the streets, has made it a lasting part of the city's cultural landscape. Memorial events are held to commemorate the disaster, and the story is often retold in local schools and community gatherings. These events serve as a way to honor the victims and educate future generations about the importance of industrial safety. The flood's legacy is preserved not just in historical records, but in the collective memory of the people of Boston. It has inspired a range of artistic expressions, from literature to visual arts, each interpreting the event in unique ways." Dr. Ann Johnson, a cultural historian, remarked, "The Great Molasses Flood has been a source of inspiration for various artists and writers. It's a story that combines tragedy with an almost surreal element, making it a compelling subject for creative exploration. Through these artistic interpretations, the flood story continues to resonate with new audiences." The cultural impact of the flood extends beyond Boston. It has been featured in national media, academic studies, and historical documentaries, cementing its place in American history as one of the most unusual and tragic industrial disasters. Modern safety standards owe much to the lessons learned from the Great Molasses Flood. Today, industrial facilities are subject to stringent regulations designed to protect both workers and the public. These regulations were developed in response to past disasters, including the Molasses Flood, to ensure that such tragedies are not repeated. Dr. Laura Mitchell, an occupational safety specialist, explained, "Regulations have evolved significantly since 1919. The focus on safety and preventive measures is much stronger, influenced by past disasters like the Molasses Flood. Today, industries are required to adhere to strict building codes, conduct regular inspections, and implement comprehensive safety protocols. Inspections, quality control, and risk assessments are now integral parts of industrial operations, ensuring that structures are safe and sound. These measures help to identify potential hazards and address them before they can cause harm. These advancements mean that the likelihood of a similar disaster occurring today is greatly reduced. However, the lessons of the past continue to guide current practices, reminding us of the importance of vigilance and accountability in industrial operations." Dr. Emily Williams, an industrial safety expert, emphasized, "The Great Molasses Flood serves as a powerful reminder of what can happen when safety is neglected. It has become a case study in industrial safety courses, teaching future engineers and managers about the critical importance of adhering to safety standards and conducting thorough inspections. As we look to the future, the legacy of the Molasses Flood ensures that safety remains a top priority in industrial settings. The disaster's impact on safety standards has contributed to the development of a more conscientious and responsible approach to industrial operations. The environmental impact of the Great Molasses Flood was significant and long-lasting. The flood not only caused immediate devastation, but also had lingering effects on the local ecosystem. The molasses seeped into the soil and waterways, causing contamination and affecting local wildlife. Dr. Catherine Lee, an environmental scientist, explained, "The sheer volume of molasses released into the environment had a profound impact. The sticky substance smothered plants, polluted water sources, and created an inhospitable environment for local wildlife. The cleanup efforts, while extensive, could not completely erase the environmental damage. The contaminated soil required extensive remediation efforts, and the waterways affected by the flood had to be cleaned to restore them to their natural state. The smell of molasses lingered in the area for decades, a constant reminder of the disaster. The environmental impact also highlighted the need for better environmental safeguards in industrial operations. The lessons learned from the Molasses Flood contributed to the development of environmental regulations aimed at preventing similar contamination in the future." Dr. Catherine Lee, an environmental scientist, stated, "The disaster underscored the importance of considering environmental impacts in industrial planning and operations. Today, environmental assessments and safeguards are integral parts of the industrial development process, helping to protect ecosystems and prevent environmental degradation." The media played a crucial role in shaping public perception of the Great Molasses Flood. Newspapers and journalists documented the disaster extensively, providing detailed accounts of the event and its aftermath. The vivid descriptions and harrowing stories captured the attention of readers across the nation. Dr. Thomas Andrews, a media historian, noted, "The coverage of the molasses flood was extensive. Newspapers not only reported on the immediate disaster, but also followed the subsequent legal battles and cleanup efforts. The media played a key role in keeping the public informed and in holding the responsible parties accountable." Photographs of the disaster site and the devastated neighborhood were published widely, bringing the tragedy into the homes of people far beyond Boston. These images, coupled with the written reports, created a powerful narrative that underscored the human and material costs of the flood. The public's reaction to the media coverage was one of shock and outrage. The detailed reports and graphic images fueled demands for accountability and justice. The flood became a national story, sparking conversations about industrial safety and corporate responsibility. Rachel Martinez, a Boston resident, recalled, "My grandmother used to tell me how the entire city was talking about the flood. It was on everyone's lips, and the newspapers kept the story alive for years." The media coverage made sure that the disaster was not forgotten and that the victims' voices were heard. The role of the media in the aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood exemplifies the power of journalism in shaping public discourse and influencing policy changes. The coverage helped to ensure that the lessons of the disaster were widely understood and remembered. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919 is more than just a historical event. It is a cautionary tale with valuable lessons for the future. The disaster's legacy continues to inform modern practices and serves as a reminder of the importance of safety, accountability, and community resilience. Dr. Susan Parker, a sociologist, reflected, "The flood teaches us about the consequences of neglecting safety and the importance of learning from past mistakes. It also highlights the resilience of communities in the face of adversity and the power of collective action in recovery efforts." The lessons learned from the flood have been integrated into various fields, from engineering and safety standards to environmental protection and disaster response. These lessons ensure that the tragedy is not forgotten and that its impact continues to shape a safer, more responsible future. As we continue to build and innovate, the story of the Great Molasses Flood serves as a guiding light, reminding us of the importance of diligence, accountability, and learning from history. By remembering the past, we can build a better and safer future for all. The economic impact of the Great Molasses Flood was significant. The immediate destruction of property, loss of lives, and disruption to businesses in the North End caused substantial financial losses. The disaster had a ripple effect on the local economy, affecting not just the area directly hit by the flood, but the broader community as well. Dr. Michael Thompson, an economic historian, explained, "The destruction caused by the molasses flood led to immediate economic challenges for the North End. Many businesses were destroyed or severely damaged, leading to loss of income and jobs. The cleanup and rebuilding efforts required significant financial resources. The cost of the cleanup was substantial, involving extensive labor and resources to remove the hardened molasses and repair the damage. Businesses affected by the flood faced lengthy closures, and some never reopened. The economic strain on the community was compounded by the loss of key infrastructure and the disruption of daily life. The financial compensation awarded through the legal settlements provided some relief to the victims and their families. However, the broader economic recovery took years. The disaster underscored the interconnected nature of industrial operations and local economies, highlighting the far-reaching consequences of such events. Dr. Michael Thompson, an economic historian, noted, "The long-term economic impact of the molasses flood was a lesson in the importance of industrial safety and corporate responsibility. The financial burden of the disaster and the subsequent compensation settlements served as a deterrent to future negligence by industrial companies." In the wake of the Great Molasses Flood, significant advances in industrial safety were made. The disaster highlighted the critical need for robust safety standards and rigorous oversight in industrial operations. These changes were implemented to prevent similar tragedies and ensure the safety of workers and the public. Dr. Laura Mitchell, an occupational safety specialist, emphasized, "The molasses flood was a turning point for industrial safety regulations. The disaster demonstrated the catastrophic consequences of neglecting safety measures. In response, new regulations were introduced to enforce stricter building codes, regular inspections, and comprehensive safety protocols. One of the key changes was the development of more stringent building codes for large storage tanks and industrial facilities. These codes required the use of higher quality materials, proper engineering reviews, and thorough testing before structures could be approved for use. Regular inspections became a mandatory part of industrial operations, aimed at identifying and addressing potential hazards before they could lead to disasters. These inspections included structural assessments, maintenance checks, and safety drills to prepare for emergency situations. Dr. Emily Williams, an industrial safety expert, remarked, "The lessons from the Molasses Flood were integrated into the training and education of engineers, architects, and safety professionals. The disaster became a case study in the importance of adhering to safety standards and the consequences of cutting corners." The advances in industrial safety that followed the Molasses Flood have had a lasting impact, contributing to the development of safer industrial practices and reducing the risk of similar disasters. The legacy of the flood continues to influence safety protocols and regulatory frameworks today. The North End community's resilience in the face of the Great Molasses Flood was remarkable. Despite the immense challenges posed by the disaster, the residents banded together to support each other and rebuild their neighborhood. This spirit of solidarity and perseverance played a crucial role in the recovery process. Frank DeLuca, a resident, reflected, "My grandparents always spoke about how the community came together after the flood. Neighbors helped each other with the cleanup, and local businesses supported those who had lost everything. It was a true testament to the strength of our community." The recovery process involved not only physical rebuilding, but also emotional healing. Community organizations, churches, and local leaders provided support and resources to help residents cope with their losses and rebuild their lives. Over time, the North End community rebuilt their homes, businesses, and infrastructure. The disaster became a defining moment in the neighborhood's history, strengthening the bonds between residents and fostering a deep sense of pride and resilience. Dr. Susan Parker, a sociologist, observed, "The community's response to the Molasses Flood is a powerful example of resilience and solidarity. The disaster brought people closer together, and the shared experience of recovery created a lasting sense of unity and strength." The story of the North End's recovery is a testament to the power of community and the human spirit. It serves as an inspiring example of how people can come together to overcome even the most devastating challenges. As we conclude our journey through the story of the Great Molasses Flood, we reflect on the lessons learned from this tragic event. The flood serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of safety, accountability, and community resilience. It is a story of tragedy and loss, but also of strength and perseverance. The legacy of the Great Molasses Flood extends beyond the immediate devastation. It has shaped industrial practices, influenced safety standards, and left an indelible mark on the community and the city of Boston. The disaster story continues to be told, ensuring that the lessons of the past are remembered and applied to build a safer future. Dr. Susan Parker, a sociologist, remarked, "The Great Molasses Flood is a poignant reminder of the need for vigilance and accountability in industrial operations. It also highlights the resilience of communities and the enduring power of collective action in the face of adversity." As we remember the victims of the Great Molasses Flood, we honor their memory and acknowledge the profound impact of their loss on the community. Their stories are a crucial part of the disaster's legacy, reminding us of the human cost of industrial negligence. The memorials and plaques dedicated to the victims serve as a lasting tribute to their memory, ensuring that they are not forgotten. These memorials also stand as a reminder of the importance of learning from history to prevent future tragedies. Luca Ricci, a descendant of victims, shared, "My family continues to honor the memory of our ancestors who were affected by the flood. It's important to remember their stories and to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. We visit the memorial plaque every year to pay our respects and to reflect on the lessons of the past." The annual remembrance ceremonies held in the North End are a testament to the enduring impact of the disaster. Community members, historians, and descendants of the victims gather to honor those who lost their lives and to reaffirm their commitment to safety and community resilience. Through these ceremonies and memorials, the story of the Great Molasses Flood is kept alive. The disaster is remembered not only as a tragic event, but also as a catalyst for change and a symbol of the strength and resilience of the community. As we reflect on the Great Molasses Flood, we are reminded of the importance of learning from history. The disaster's legacy continues to inform modern practices and serves as a powerful reminder of the need for diligence, accountability, and community solidarity. In recent years, efforts to educate the public about the Great Molasses Flood have intensified. Schools, museums, and historical societies have integrated the story into their educational programs, ensuring that the lessons of the past are passed down to future generations. Dr. Laura Mitchell, an educator, explained, "The story of the Great Molasses Flood is an important part of our local history curriculum. By teaching students about the disaster, we help them understand the importance of safety, the impact of industrialization, and the strength of community resilience. These lessons are crucial for developing informed and conscientious citizens." Museums and historical societies have played a key role in preserving the history of the flood. The Boston Museum of Science and the North End Historical Society have created detailed exhibits that bring the story to life for visitors of all ages. Through these educational efforts, the Great Molasses Flood remains a relevant and powerful story. The disaster's legacy continues to inspire new generations to prioritize safety, community, and the importance of learning from history. Dr. Susan Parker, a sociologist, noted, "The continued interest in the Great Molasses Flood reflects its enduring significance. It's a story that resonates on many levels, historically, socially, and culturally. By keeping the memory alive, we honor the victims and ensure that the lessons learned are not forgotten." Ongoing research into the Great Molasses Flood continues to uncover new insights and perspectives on the disaster. Historians, engineers, and scientists are exploring the event from various angles, contributing to a deeper understanding of its causes, impacts, and legacy. Dr. Robert Thompson, an engineer, explained, "Our research into the molasses flood has revealed more about the structural weaknesses of the tank and the environmental conditions that contributed to the disaster. By applying modern engineering principles to historical events, we can gain new insights and improve current safety standards. Advances in technology have enabled more detailed simulations and analyses of the disaster. These studies are helping to refine our understanding of how the tank failed and the dynamics of the molasses wave, providing valuable data for improving industrial safety." Dr. Jane Smith, a historian, remarked, "The interdisciplinary approach to studying the Great Molasses Flood is yielding new perspectives on the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the disaster. This research not only enhances our historical understanding, but also informs contemporary discussions about industrial safety and community resilience. The findings from this ongoing research are being integrated into educational programs, policy discussions, and industrial practices, ensuring that the lessons of the Great Molasses Flood continue to influence modern society. As we look to the future, the story of the Great Molasses Flood remains a vital part of our collective memory. It serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, the power of community, and the enduring impact of history on our lives. This has been the story of the Great Molasses Flood of 1919. Thank you for joining us in this exploration of history, tragedy, and resilience. May we continue to learn from the past to build a safer and more conscientious future for all.